At 9:47 a.m., Shaq collapses. He is not on a basketball court. He is in a dark alley that smells like trash. He only wanted to find house number 124. That was his home before he was famous. But his age and old injuries are too much. The medics refuse to help him. They think he is just a giant, crazy man. A little girl named Mia holds his rough hand. It is a fight between a true hero and a cold system. Will they find out he is Dr. O'Neal before it is too late? The alley was narrow and wet. Old newspapers stuck to the ground like gum. A rusty dumpster leaked something dark near the wall. Shaq lay on his back, staring at a thin strip of sky. His knees felt like someone had driven nails into them. 19 seasons of pounding on hard courts had left a mark. That mark did not care that he was rich now. It did not care about his rings or his fame. Pain does not read a resume. It just arrives and takes a seat. He tasted blood in his mouth, thin and metallic. His lip had split when he fell against the brick. The smell of rotting food from a nearby restaurant made his stomach turn. Somewhere close, a chemical plant hummed low and steady. Newark had not changed much since he was a boy here. The cracks in the sidewalks still looked the same. The tired buildings still leaned like old men on canes. He remembered running these same streets barefoot at 10 years old. Back then, his stomach hurt from hunger, not age. Now his body hurt from a different kind of debt. A siren wailed somewhere far off, then faded into the morning noise. A pigeon landed near his head, pecking at a piece of old bread. He almost laughed at the strangeness of it all. Here he was, a man once cheered by 20,000 people. Now he was flat on his back, ignored by a bird. Life had a strange way of humbling even the tallest among us. He thought about his own children, safe at home, unaware their father struggled here. He thought about the fans, who believed he was invincible, untouchable by pain. None of them could see him now, small and human on this ground. Maybe that was the most honest moment of his entire year. He tried to push himself up. His arm shook and gave out. 7 feet and 1 inch of muscle, and bone refused to obey him. He was used to being powerful. Now he felt like a fallen statue. A stranger walking by might think he was drunk. Or worse, they might think he was dangerous. That thought made him more afraid than the pain did. He closed his eyes and breathed through his nose. Somewhere in his memory, his mother's voice spoke calm and steady. "Get up, baby," she used to say. "Getting up is the only job you have." Back then, she said it every morning before school. She said it when the lights got shut off. She said it when there was no food in the fridge. Lucille never let her children believe hunger meant they were small. She told him a big body needed an even bigger will. That lesson stuck with him long after he grew rich and famous. It stuck with him now, flat on his back in an alley. Somewhere deep in his chest, a small ember of that will still burned. It was faint, but it was there, refusing to go out completely. He thought about all the arenas he had filled with roaring crowds. He thought about the championship rings sitting in a drawer at home. None of that mattered on this cracked, dirty pavement today. Fame could not lift a fallen body from the ground. Money could not fix a knee that had given up years ago. Only will could do that, one small breath at a time. He counted slowly in his head, the way his mother taught him. 1, 2, 3. He pushed against the concrete, with everything he had left. He forced his eyes open again, blinking through the sting of sweat. A small shadow blocked the weak morning light. It was a girl, maybe 9 years old. Her sneakers were torn at the toes. In her small hand, she held a crumpled piece of paper. It was a past-due electric bill for $112.14. Her eyes were wide, but she did not run. Most people ran from a giant stranger on the ground. She knelt down instead, careful and quiet. "Mister," she said, "are you okay?" Her name was Mia. She lived 2 blocks from this alley. She had been walking to the corner store for her mom. She saw the big man fall like a tree in a storm. Anyone else would have called for help and left. Mia stayed. She reached out and touched his rough, scarred hand. His hand was bigger than her whole arm. It did not scare her. It felt like a mountain that needed help standing. She had seen fear before, and this did not feel like fear at all. Shaq tried to speak, but his throat was dry. He pointed weakly toward the mouth of the alley. On the wall past her shoulder, a street sign read Bergen Street. His eyes drifted to the bill in her hand. The address printed at the top said number 124. That was the exact house he had come looking for. It was the house where he grew up poor and hungry. It was the house being taken from a family today. He realized then why he could not just lie there. Mia was not just a child who found him by chance. She was the reason his tired heart still had to move. If he stayed down, a family would lose their home. If he stayed down, a stranger's daughter would lose her roof. He grabbed her small shoulder gently, careful not to crush her. "Call an ambulance," he whispered. "Not for me. For time. I need to reach that house by 2 o'clock." Mia tilted her head, confused by his strange, urgent request. Most grown men who fell down just asked for help for themselves. This giant stranger seemed more worried about a clock than his own body. She did not know his name yet or why he mattered so much. She only knew his eyes looked kind, even through all that pain. That was enough for her to trust him without asking more questions. Some kids learn early that trust is a rare, careful gift. Mia had learned to give it only when it felt earned. Something about this fallen giant felt earned already, somehow, instantly. Mia did not understand everything he said, but she understood urgency. She pulled out an old flip phone from her pocket. Her fingers, small and fast, dialed for help immediately. While she waited, she stayed by his side. She did not ask why a giant man cared about her bill. She did not ask why he needed to reach a house so badly. She just held his hand and told him to keep breathing. The ambulance arrived 12 minutes later, lights spinning without sound. 2 paramedics stepped out, moving slower than the moment required. Their names were Cooper and Miller, and their faces showed no urgency. They looked at Shaq lying in the dirty alley. They saw torn sweatpants, unshaven cheeks, and desperate eyes. They did not see a retired champion in pain. They saw what they expected to see in an alley like this. Another one. Cooper muttered to his partner, not bothering to lower his voice. Miller shook his head, already reaching for his radio instead of his bag. They assumed Shaq was homeless, or worse, that he was dangerous. His size, to them, was not impressive. It was a threat. "We can't lift him," Miller said flatly. "Our stretcher only holds 300 pounds. It was a convenient excuse, and they both knew it. They talked about calling the police instead of finishing their job. To them, a huge man passed out in an alley meant trouble. It did not occur to them that trouble might be arriving late. It did not occur to them that this man once broke backboards for a living. Shaq heard every word through the fog of pain. He said nothing back. He closed his eyes and breathed slowly through the insult. Silence, he had learned long ago, was heavier than any shout. Mia would not accept their retreat. She stood in front of the ambulance, arms wide like a small wall. "You have to help him," she said, voice shaking but loud. Cooper told her to move out of the way, please. She did not move. She reached into her pocket and pulled something out. It was an old plastic medal, the paint mostly worn away. It read Junior All-Star in faded letters across the front. She had won it years ago at a small school tournament. Her father had cheered, so loud that day his voice went hoarse. He had told her that medal meant more than any trophy in the world. It meant somebody tried their hardest when it would have been easier to quit. She carried it everywhere after he passed away last year. It felt like carrying a small piece of his voice with her always. Now, standing in front of 2 doubtful paramedics, she needed that voice badly. She needed to believe trying hard could still change something important today. She pressed the medal into Shaq's giant palm without a word. It weighed almost nothing, cheap plastic from a school gym years ago. But something about it cracked through his exhaustion like lightning. He remembered every trophy he ever earned meant nothing without effort behind it. He remembered every kid who ever looked up to him for hope. He could not die in a dead-end alley while this child believed in him. Using every muscle left in his body, he twisted onto his side. His joints screamed, but he pushed himself upright anyway. Seeing him move, even the paramedics could not ignore it now. His sheer will, silent and steady, forced their hands. Cooper and Miller exchanged a look, unsure but suddenly nervous. They helped him onto the gurney, straining under his real weight. Once inside the ambulance, they made another choice that mattered. Instead of driving him to the nearest full hospital, they picked St. Jude Local. It was the roughest, most overwhelmed clinic in the entire city. Shaq did not argue. He had a mission, and time was already leaking away. The ride was short, but felt endless to him. Through small ambulance windows, he watched Newark blur past in gray. He saw the same corner stores, the same tired faces waiting for buses. He saw kids his age used to run with, now grown and older like him. St. Jude Local appeared ahead, a squat brick building with peeling paint. Inside, it looked worse than outside. Cracked tile floors, buzzing fluorescent lights, and a waiting room packed with people. Every chair was filled with someone tired, sick, or both. Shaq had to fold himself into a plastic chair meant for smaller bodies. His knees pressed against his chest, his back aching from the shape. Around him, nobody recognized his face. He had not shaved in days, and exhaustion had changed everything about him. To this room, he was just another big, tired man waiting. Waiting rooms like this did not care who you used to be. An old man beside him coughed into a paper towel, tired eyes closing. A young mother across the room bounced a crying baby on her knee. Everyone here carried some kind of weight nobody else could see. Shaq understood that weight better than most people would guess. He had grown up watching his own mother wait in rooms just like this one. Back then, waiting meant hoping a doctor would not ask about insurance first. Some things about being poor in America never seemed to change much. He watched Mia sit beside him, swinging her feet nervously against the chair. She kept glancing at the clock, worried in a way children should not have to be. An hour passed, with painful slowness inside that crowded room. A doctor named Leo walked by more than once without stopping. Leo was young, sharp-dressed, and clearly impatient with the whole clinic. He kept calling names for patients holding gold insurance cards first. People without those cards, like Shaq, sat and watched the clock. It was a quiet, cruel kind of unfairness playing out in real time. Shaq understood this system better than Leo probably realized. A nurse named Clara noticed something the doctor missed completely. She saw Shaq's skin turning pale, his breathing shallow and uneven. She had worked this clinic for 20 years and trusted her instincts. Without asking permission, she brought him a small cup of sugar water. She wrapped a thin, worn blanket around his massive shoulders quietly. "Drink slow," she said, kneeling slightly to meet his tired eyes. He thanked her, with a small, exhausted smile despite the cold sweat on his neck. Clara's kindness reminded him why he still trusted good people existed. Not every gatekeeper was cruel, even inside a broken system. Some people, like her, still saw a human being first. He held on to that thought as the minutes kept slipping away. Clara had worked nights and weekends for 2 decades in this clinic. She had seen every kind of patient walk through those tired doors. She had also seen good people get overlooked because of how they looked. Something about the giant man's quiet patience reminded her of her own father. He had been a factory worker, big and gentle, often misjudged by strangers. She patted Shaq's arm once, before returning to her rounds. "Hang in there," she said softly. "Not everyone here is as blind as they seem." Her words gave him a small, steady comfort he badly needed right then. On a small television bolted to the waiting room wall, news played quietly. A reporter stood outside a house, microphone in hand, talking fast. The headline scrolling below read, "Newark foreclosure auction today, Bergen Street." Shaq's whole body went rigid when he saw the address. It was 124, the same house, from Mia's bill. The auction was set to begin at 2 o'clock that afternoon. He checked the clock on the wall, his stomach tightening with dread. It was already past 1:15, and he was still trapped here. He tried to stand, ready to leave despite his weakened legs. That is when Dr. Leo finally noticed him, blocking his path with security. "You haven't paid for your initial exam," Leo said, arms crossed tightly. The fee was $45, small but suddenly impossible to solve. Shaq reached for his pocket, realizing he carried no cash today. He had left his wallet behind in the rush to find Mia's address. All he had was a black credit card and a folded check. The check, worth $250,000, was hidden inside his sock. When he mentioned it, the security guards actually laughed out loud. "Sure you do, big guy," one guard said, smirking at his own joke. To them, a man dressed like this could not possibly hold real money. They saw torn sweatpants and mistook it for an obvious lie. Shaq stayed calm, though his heart pounded harder with every wasted second. Mia, standing nearby, watched security push her closer to the exit doors. "Let him go," she shouted, but nobody listened to a child. 2 guards moved to physically block Shaq from leaving the building. His vision blurred for a moment, dizziness rushing through his skull. His heart stumbled, skipping a beat inside his aching chest. He had 2 choices standing right in front of him now. He could fight his way through, using strength built over decades. Or he could hold his ground and protect what mattered most. Fighting would end everything he had quietly built his whole life. It would turn him into exactly what these strangers already assumed he was. For one brief second, old anger rose up inside his chest. He thought about every camera that ever waited for him to slip. He thought about every headline ready to call him a scary giant. One wrong move here could feed that old, tired story forever. He could already imagine the words, "Former athlete attacks hospital staff." That story would erase every quiet kindness he had ever tried to build. It would prove every fear these strangers already carried about someone like him. He would not give them that story today, no matter the cost. He chose the harder path instead of the easy one. He lowered himself down, onto one knee, facing Mia directly. His enormous frame folded until his eyes matched hers completely. "Never let someone else's anger poison your heart," he told her softly. His voice, deep and steady, cut through the chaos around them both. Mia nodded, tears gathering but not falling down her cheeks. In that small, quiet moment, dignity mattered more than escape. That is when a different voice rang out across the room. The hospital's administrator, a man named Wallace, had walked in unexpectedly. He froze mid-step, staring at the giant kneeling near security guards. "Dr. O'Neal?" he asked, disbelief written all over his face. Wallace had followed basketball his entire life, especially this one player's career. The room went completely silent, every head turning toward the kneeling giant. Leo's face drained of color instantly, his arrogance evaporating in seconds. Cooper and Miller, still nearby filling out paperwork, froze in place too. Their earlier comments about crazy men suddenly felt like poison in their mouths. Shaq did not stand up and shout at anyone present. He did not demand apologies or threaten anyone's job that day. His power revealed itself simply through silence and calm presence. That silence shook the room harder than any angry outburst could. Wallace rushed forward, apologizing repeatedly, offering his own car immediately. Shaq waved off the offer gently, standing to his full height. He reached into his sock and pulled out the folded check. He did not use it to punish anyone standing frozen around him. Instead, he asked Wallace one simple, urgent question about transportation. "I need a cab," he said. "The cheapest one you can find." Wallace blinked, confused why a rich man wanted something so plain. Shaq did not explain himself further, already moving toward the exit. Mia grabbed his hand again as they walked out together quickly. A yellow cab pulled up minutes later, its engine rattling loudly. Shaq folded his body into the back seat, wincing at the tight space. Mia climbed in beside him, still gripping his hand tightly. "Bergen Street," he told the driver. "As fast as you safely can." The clock read 1:45, 15 minutes before the auction closed. Every red light felt like a personal insult during that desperate ride. During the drive, Mia spoke quietly about her father for the first time. He had been a house painter, tall like Shaq, gentle like him too. He passed away 3 years ago, from a sickness nobody caught early enough. Her mother worked 2 jobs now, trying to keep their small family afloat. The house was not just an address to Mia's family. It held her father's handprints, painted walls, and last memories together. Shaq listened, saying little, letting her grief breathe freely beside him. "He used to sing while he painted," Mia said, staring out the window. "Old songs, silly ones, the kind that make you laugh." She smiled a little, remembering the sound of his rough voice. Shaq squeezed her hand gently, careful with his enormous fingers. He knew that kind of memory well, the kind that lives in a house. His own mother's kitchen still smelled like cornbread in his mind, even now. Some houses were not just walls and a roof over your head. They were the last place a family's laughter still echoed. Losing that house would mean losing the last room, where her father's voice remained. He would not let that happen while he still had breath in his body. The cab driver, an older man named Frank, kept glancing in his mirror. He recognized something about the giant passenger, but could not place it exactly. He decided not to ask questions and just focused on driving fast. Every pothole made Shaq wince, his body still aching from the collapse earlier. But his eyes stayed fixed forward, watching the street signs pass by quickly. Bergen Street was close now, just a few more blocks away. The cab turned onto Bergen Street, with only minutes left. A small crowd had gathered outside number 124 already. A bank representative stood on the porch, holding a gavel in his hand. A real estate investor stood nearby, smiling like he already owned the place. The auctioneer raised his gavel high, ready to call the final sale. Shaq stepped out of the cab, his shadow stretching long across the yard. His sudden appearance stopped everyone on that porch mid-motion instantly. The investor's smile faltered, confusion replacing his earlier confidence completely. Shaq walked forward, each step slow, but absolutely certain of purpose. He held out the check, now worth $250,000.82. The extra cents covered the principal, late fees, and accumulated interest exactly. The bank representative stared at the number, stunned into silence. The investor, a slick man named Roland, tried to laugh off the interruption. "This is a legal auction," he said, adjusting his tie nervously. "You can't just walk up and stop it with a piece of paper." Shaq did not raise his voice or step closer threateningly. He simply held the check steady, waiting for the numbers to speak instead. Roland looked at the bank representative, hoping for support. That never came. The representative, a tired man named Grant, had already started doing the math. A check for this amount, valid and signed, changed everything about today's auction. "This clears the debt," Shaq said, voice calm despite his racing heart. "The house stays with this family today right now." The investor tried to argue, mentioning contracts and proper bidding procedures loudly. Shaq did not raise his voice or threaten anyone standing there. He simply waited, patient as stone, until the representative nodded slowly. The gavel never fell for the investor that afternoon at all. Number 124 belonged to Mia's family once again. Mia's mother came running out, confused by the sudden commotion outside. She saw her daughter standing beside a giant, gentle stranger. Shaq did not keep the house for himself or his memories. He signed it directly over to Mia's mother on the spot. "This was my home once," he told her simply, without extra explanation. "Now it's yours, free and clear, forever." Her hands shook as she held the paperwork, tears finally falling freely. Her name was Denise, and she had worked 2 jobs since her husband died. She cleaned offices at night and packed boxes at a warehouse by day. She never imagined a stranger would appear and save her family's home. She looked at Shaq, still confused about who exactly he was. "Why would you do this for us?" she asked, voice trembling with disbelief. Shaq looked toward the porch, toward the door he used to run through as a boy. "Because somebody once did something like this for my mother," he said quietly. He did not explain further, letting the moment settle into something warm and simple. Neighbors began stepping out onto their porches, drawn by the growing crowd. Word spread fast on a street like this, house to house. Nobody understood the full story yet, but everyone felt the shift in the air. A house that was supposed to be lost that afternoon now stood saved. Children rode their bikes closer, curious about the tall stranger near the porch. For a moment, Bergen Street felt lighter than it had in years. The giant man from Newark's poorest streets had returned home quietly. He had not come back to relive old glory or fame. He came back to make sure a child's home stayed standing. Standing on that porch, memories of his own childhood surrounded him completely. He remembered running up these same steps, hungry but hopeful anyway. He remembered his mother's voice telling him to keep believing regardless. That belief had carried him from poverty into greatness, quietly, patiently. But his work that day was not finished yet completely. He asked the cab driver to take him back to St. Jude. Mia and her mother rode along, still stunned by the afternoon's events. Back at the clinic, staff members waited nervously, expecting harsh consequences immediately. Nobody expected forgiveness from the man they had treated so poorly. Shaq walked in, calm as ever, surprising everyone present again. He did not fire Leo or punish the frightened security guards. He did not humiliate Cooper or Miller for their earlier judgment. Instead, he spoke with Wallace about donating new medical equipment entirely. He pledged $2 million toward machines this struggling clinic desperately needed. There was only one condition attached to his generous, quiet gift. No one gets turned away because of how they look, he said firmly. Wallace nodded quickly, already picturing new equipment filling empty rooms. He promised new scanners, new beds, and a properly sized stretcher too. That last part made Shaq almost smile despite everything that happened today. Cooper and Miller stood off to the side, unsure what to say. They expected anger, maybe even a lawsuit, over their earlier refusal. Instead, Shaq walked over and spoke to them directly, voice calm. "Next time," he said, "look twice before deciding who deserves help." Cooper lowered his eyes, ashamed of the assumption he made that morning. Miller nodded slowly, the weight of the moment sinking in fully. Neither man forgot that lesson for the rest of their careers. He also asked Clara, the kind nurse, to walk with him privately. Quietly, without any cameras or announcements, he cleared unpaid bills. $184,219.55. That amount covered debts for patients too poor to pay their own bills. He asked that it all be recorded under one simple name only. The tall stranger. The paperwork would read, nothing more revealed. Clara promised to keep his identity private, respecting his quiet request completely. Leo approached him later, embarrassed, apologizing for his earlier cold behavior. Shaq accepted the apology, without lecturing or holding onto old anger. "Everybody deserves a second look," he told Leo simply. "Especially the ones who seem invisible." Leo nodded, something shifting behind his eyes that had not been there before. Leo had grown up comfortable, never once worried about paying a hospital bill. He never had to wait extra hours because his insurance card looked wrong. Watching Shaq quietly clear strangers' debts changed something in his thinking permanently. He realized his job was never just about medicine and machines. It was about seeing people, really seeing them, before judging their worth. He walked back to his patients, that evening a little slower, a little kinder. Small changes like that rarely make headlines, but they matter anyway. Sometimes the quietest lessons travel the farthest, planted in just one afternoon. By late afternoon, the sun began sinking low over Newark's rooftops. Shaq sat on the porch steps of number 124. Mia sat beside him, sharing a small piece of dry bread together. It was simple food, nothing fancy, shared between two unlikely friends. The house behind them held new memories now, alongside the old ones. Somewhere inside, Mia's mother hummed quietly, while unpacking a few boxes. The clock on a nearby church tower struck 4:21 precisely. Neither of them spoke for a while, just enjoying the quiet moment. Shaq thought about how strength was never really about muscles alone. Real strength lived in stillness, in choosing patience over anger every single time. It lived in kneeling down to meet a child's eyes directly. It lived in giving, without needing applause or recognition from anyone watching. A gentle breeze moved through the street, carrying the smell of someone's dinner cooking nearby. Somewhere down the block, a radio played an old soul song softly. Shaq closed his eyes for a moment, letting the sound settle over him. This was the Newark he remembered, tired but alive, hard but honest. It was not the Newark from magazine covers or highlight reels. It was the real one, the one that raised him before anyone knew his name. Mia looked up at him, still amazed by everything that happened today. "Are you really a famous basketball player?" she finally asked him directly. Shaq smiled, looking out at the street where he once played barefoot. "I'm just a man who remembers being hungry," he said quietly. "That's all that matters, really." The alley, the ambulance, and the cold system faded into the past. She looked down at the metal in her hand, turning it over slowly. "Maybe this isn't just plastic anymore," she said, half to herself. Shaq nodded, understanding exactly what she meant, without more words needed. Some objects carry weight far beyond what they are made of. That metal had opened a door no ambulance driver could unlock alone. It had reminded a tired giant why standing back up still mattered. What remained was a porch, a piece of bread, and absolute silence. Newark's noise continued somewhere beyond them, indifferent to what just happened. But on that small porch, dignity had won a quiet, lasting victory. Sometimes the biggest heroes do not announce themselves with grand speeches. Sometimes they just show up, kneel down, and refuse to give up. Sometimes the softest voice carries the loudest kind of power. And somewhere across Newark, word began spreading slowly among the people. A tall stranger had saved a house and quietly cleared old debts. Nobody could quite explain exactly who he was for certain, but everyone who heard the story felt something warm rise inside them. Maybe it did not matter whether he stayed anonymous or not. What mattered was that someone still cared enough to kneel down low. At the barber shop down the street, men traded pieces of the story. At the corner church, someone mentioned it during Sunday announcements quietly. Nobody had proof, just a feeling that something good had happened nearby. In a city used to hard news, soft news like this traveled slowly. But it traveled anyway, house to house, porch to porch, block to block. Some stories do not need proof to change how people feel. They only need one person willing to believe them and pass them along. Mia never forgot that morning in the alley for the rest of her life. She kept the plastic medal, now missing even more paint than before. It sat on her windowsill, a small reminder of an enormous lesson learned. Kindness did not need a name, a title, or even an explanation. It just needed someone willing to stop, to kneel, and to help. And on Bergen Street, that lesson would live on quietly forever. Years later, when Mia grew older, she would tell this story often. She would tell it to friends, to teachers, to anyone who asked about her childhood. Some people doubted parts of it, saying it sounded too good to be true. She never cared what they believed, because she had been there herself. She had felt his rough hand shaking in hers, that cold morning. She had watched a giant kneel down to meet her eyes with kindness. That memory needed no proof beyond what she carried in her heart. It became the compass she used for the rest of her life. Whenever she saw someone struggling, ignored, or judged unfairly, she remembered that alley. She remembered that even the strongest people sometimes fall and still deserve help. Denise kept the house exactly as it was, painting the same soft blue walls. She never sold it, never rented it out, never let it go. It stood as a quiet reminder that good things could still happen unexpectedly. Every year, on the same date, she would sit on the porch step. She would think about the tall stranger who once gave everything back. She never learned much more about who he truly was before fame. She only knew he understood what it meant to lose and to hope. That understanding, more than his size or his money, made him unforgettable.